everyone, to today's program. Hopefully you can see me. My name is Ilissa Miller. I am the founder and CEO of iMiller Public Relations. We are a PR firm that focuses solely on the digital infrastructure industry. And I have personally been in the digital infrastructure industry, when we used to only call it telecommunications, since 1996. And it's been a heck of a ride. It has been a wonderful experience, and it is my honor and my pleasure today to bring to you this program with and for INCOMPAS, one of the most important organizations and associations in our industry, especially today with all the changes going on. Chip Pickering is here with me today. Chip Pickering has been the CEO of INCOMPAS since January 2014. So he is easily 10 years into his role, and he has achieved quite a bit of growth, leading internet, backbone, business broadband, wireless, and international companies to navigate quite a few challenges that we're facing in the market. Under his leadership, INCOMPAS has led numerous public policy campaigns promoting competition through an open internet and in the business broadband market. Chip is also a six-term congressman. He represented Mississippi's 3rd District, and during his time in the House, he served on the Energy and Commerce Committee, where he was vice chairman from 2002 to 2006 and a member of the Telecommunications Subcommittee. He was also co-chairman and founder of the Congressional Wireless Caucus and an assistant minority whip of the House. He has great experience, in particular because of his role in drafting the 1996 Telecommunications Act. That is how he became very well known as a congressional leader on telecommunications issues. I will personally say that our industry is better at having Chip Pickering here leading INCOMPAS. And it is very exciting to see what is going to happen next. And our conversation today is meant to educate you, inform you, and inspire you about what is actually happening in the space, what INCOMPAS's role is, how you can get involved, and why this all matters, especially now. So Chip, welcome. You ready?
Well, it's good to be with you. And it's been a wonderful partnership with you over the last 10 years as we've tried both to work together, partner, advocate together, introduce each other to different companies that are building out the digital infrastructure and really laying the groundwork for our future economy and the future applications that are emerging today. And I look forward to our conversation today.
Yeah, well, thank you. And thanks for letting me be the one to do this chat with you. 10 years now at INCOMPAS, you clearly have a passion for the industry from your experience in 1996 Telecommunications Act, which literally opened the floodgates to competition. And so from what I just read and introduced to you, right, it's clear you've got telecom, technology, and competition top of mind as your own personal passions. And so when it comes to INCOMPAS, how are you applying that to the organization and leading this industry through this next iteration of growth?
As you ask that question, I'm kind of thinking back over time and history to now present, and then as we look to the future. And I came to Washington as a very young first presidential appointee to the first President Bush, and then joined Senator Trent Lott's staff in 1991. And the first legislation I had the opportunity to work on with him was taking from the success of competition in the long distance industry after the breakup of AT&T, and it really was the birth of what we now know as INCOMPAS. Back then was known as CommTel, and they were the first founding voice of competition And once we ended the monopoly in long distance, and we saw companies like MCI and Sprint and in my home state of Mississippi, WorldCom emerge and build fiber internet backbone networks, and the tremendous success of competition, investment, innovation that came from that, really the foundation of the internet economy, digital economy. That was the first big step of what competition meant in our sector and for our community. And so we were looking, as I joined Centerlot staff in 1992, is how do we bring competition to the cable industry through satellite? And then the next thing we did in 1993 is how do we bring competition to the wireless and cellular industry? How do we go from a duopoly to an auction policy where we can have up to 7 per market? And we did that in 1993. And then the foundational kind of the competition constitution that we established in 1996, which is all networks compete against each other, interconnect with each other, and that we have, as the law of the land instead of a monopoly policy, a policy that promotes competition in every sector. And CompTel, now INCOMPAS, was there to advocate when I was a young staffer. And then as I became a member in Congress and on the Energy and Commerce Committee from 1997 to 2008, they were always the voice for competition. And sometimes it was a lonely voice against very powerful interests that were trying to reestablish, not that they could reestablish a monopoly, but to limit competition as much as possible. And as I retired from Congress and then went into the private sector, I continued to represent a lot of our companies that are in INCOMPAS today and others that are still fighting and promoting and building competitive networks. And so when I had the opportunity to become CEO in 2014, I thought it'd be a great way to use the experience and the background, but also the passion and the principles that that you and I have seen work so remarkably well and make a difference in everyday lives, in our communities, the broader economy. And it's something I just truly believe in. So it's an honor and a privilege to get to represent our industry and the companies that we have in INCOMPAS.
That's remarkable because, you know, being able to have a holistic understanding and view of the evolution of the industry is really key to understanding how we might evolve it from here. We've got quite a bit going on, and I'd love to get insights from you about what you feel might be the most significant emerging trends in the digital infrastructure landscape now, knowing what you know and sitting where you sit and seeing what you are seeing.
Well, it's an exciting time because we're seeing really the realization of a lot of our hopes. I don't know if dreams are the right word, or the imagination, the things that were probably unimaginable, incomprehensible, going back to 1996 of what's happening today. But coming out of COVID, the country made, our Congress made a national commitment to connect every American to internet, to the broadband networks of the future, and to do it in a smart way, in a way that really was bottom up. How do we get our local communities in our states working together to identify unserved, underserved areas, and then to make sure that every American, every community had the networks that are now essential and necessary for every American's both education, healthcare, job, success. And so INCOMPAS, I'm very proud. We were the first association to endorse what became the Internet for All, then the Bridge Act, and the final bipartisan agreement on the and what we now know as BEAD. And then we worked very closely with the Commerce Department, NTIA, and setting the rules of the road on how states will implement it. And we have continued to work state by state with our companies as each state tries to submit a plan and prepare for the competitive process and eventually the awards that we believe will be coming in the next year to achieve this national objective. So that's very important. We also advocate on the practical ways to remove barriers to deployment of our advanced competitive networks, whether that is a fiber network, fixed wireless network, low Earth orbit satellite network, every type of technology there is that is deploying our future networks. We're trying to remove, whether it is the railroad that serves as a barrier, the ability to attach to poles as quickly as possible, the permitting process, how do we get into the right of way? And so all of those issues, how do we establish the best practices, the checklist of having cities and localities broadband ready so that our companies can invest and build networks as fast and as affordable and as cost effectively as possible. So that's one of the big areas that we're focused on. We've just established an AI competition center at INCOMPAS, and we can talk about that a little bit more in a broader sense. But I'm very excited about what is this. I'm trying to think of this huge wave of innovation that's going to be pervasive and profound, and every bit as important as the commercial internet to our economy and way of life. What AI is going to mean for every one of us, and so we can talk about AI and what that means for our networks and for the companies we represent also.
Yeah, we're definitely going to go there. I want to just go back, if we could, for a minute, because you talked quite a bit about, well, the post-COVID, obviously COVID really accelerated and brought awareness and light to the US government and its need to connect everyone and create equal opportunity. So that we're seeing underway. You mentioned BEAD. I anticipate that there might be some people who are tuning into our program today that may not know about BEAD and what opportunities may still be available for companies that are building out broadband network infrastructure to underserved markets. Can you expand a little bit on some insight there about what the BEAD is, what might still be available, and what those timelines could look like?
So Congress authorized $42.5 billion to be dedicated to the deployment of networks in the underserved areas. And by that, any area that doesn't meet 100 by 20 speed capacity. And we have really advocated, INCOMPAS has, that really a preference and a priority for at least 1 gig. It's what our international competitors are doing. And as we look at the future, how do we future-proof our network? So the priorities and the preference of the grant program BEAD and building the $42.5 billion is to try to get as high as a preference for high speed, high capacity, scalable networks that can meet the demand of the future. And we think that we'll see more and more of the states have their plans approved, the maps ready, and then the awards will be going out in the first half of next year. So if any company that's listening or anybody who's listening, the opportunity is still fully available for everyone to participate in and to look at in their respective markets and states, how to compete for the BEAD if they so choose, or how to partner, or how to be ready for this huge infusion of both private capital and public money to connect every American. And we are seeing historic levels of building and deploying and new companies entering the market. And so it's really exciting, both on the private investment side and on the public investment side, to see how our country is really, in our companies that are in INCOMPAS. The competitive infrastructure that we've always wanted in our country is emerging and taking root, and it comes in many different forms and fashion and technologies, and that's really the environment, the ecosystem that we've always fought for, worked for, advocated for, and now we're beginning to see.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. I'd love to have our listeners get an example of how you might help a member company who would like to learn about BEAD and potentially consider, applying for funding through their state. Just a short example would be great so that they can appreciate how well you can and support them.
Well, thank you. So we have a great policy team led by Angie Cronenberg, the president of INCOMPAS, and then she has a team including Neelan Gamble, a whole host of both expert subject matter experts, great advocates, lawyers who have worked at the FCC and the regulatory body and have worked and advocated in Congress. So if anyone called INCOMPAS, we would, one, give them all the information of the current status, not only of BEAD on a national level, what it means, but on a state by state. We work very closely with state broadband offices. If they are having trouble connecting with the broadband office, we can connect them. If there's anything that needs to be advocated in those states, we can put coalitions of our companies together to go to the broadband office and advocate for a competitive process, but to make sure that it's meeting the guidelines of the Commerce Department, and then advocate for them and help them. Hopefully, if they want to go after a grant funding, that they will have all the information that they need to compete and to do well in that process. and we've been, we think, very successful in getting the program and the guidelines and the principles right. And we think that soon we will begin seeing awards being made around the country. But it's not to take away anything from what we're seeing on the private investment side. Historic levels of private investment flowing into the market. As we talked about before, AI and the demand for AI is going to be another huge driver of investment into our networks and into the digital infrastructure. Data centers are a critical component of the AI ecosystem. And so we can talk a little bit about that, because in our membership, we have not only the networks, but the data centers, and then all of the leading internet companies that are developing the AI applications, like Microsoft and Google and Amazon and Meta. So it's really a unique community that brings all sides of the market together around our core principles.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you brought up data centers, especially in the context of BEAD, because I kind of, think in my head, well, the BEAD initiative is fantastic, but you can't have a network that doesn't go anywhere, right? You need that data center, and you need to have that area for the compute infrastructure and the processing and all of that kind of stuff. And there's, some interesting things happening in the industry with data centers and power requirements and all of that, which again is being fed by the promise of AI. And so let's talk about AI a little bit. INCOMPAS, right? As I mentioned earlier, right, setting you up and your experience, you can, your gut can anticipate what's coming next and what's needed next for the industry to remain open and competitive, right? That's the key thing here for INCOMPAS, is that competition angle. And so you have started a new initiative called the Artificial Intelligence Competition Center, the AICC. Can you share more about that?
So we believe that as we go into this election and get ready for whoever the next administration is, and however Congress is configured politically on a partisan basis, we believe, just like broadband, that there will be a large bipartisan effort to create a regulatory and legal legislative framework, guardrails around AI and its great, tremendous benefit, but also how do you mitigate against the risk? How do you make sure that it's safe, is trusted? And from our core value mission, how is it as competitive as possible? How do we maintain as much innovation, a permissionless approach, but with the right guardrails? How do we reach that balance? And so we're working with all of our member companies, and we're also establishing partnerships with universities on a regional basis. So, for example, the University of Mississippi has established the Center for Narrative Intelligence. They work closely with the Department of Defense and our intelligence agencies as they monitor how social media and misinformation and disinformation could be used in different crisis areas of the world, and how do they look at artificial intelligence means to monitor that, and then to counter those narratives in a way that can help stabilize a region. Then the University of Arizona, the president of the University of Arizona is a good friend named Bobby Robbins. He was the former CEO and president of the Texas Medical Center, MD Anderson, the largest cancer research center in the world when he led it, still today. But at the University of Arizona, as you see the emergence of NVIDIA and the chips and the data center ecosystem, he's right in the middle of what has created a lot of the ecosystem that we're seeing in AI. So a tremendous voice. Then we're working with the University of Cincinnati, the Portman Center, Dr. Richard Hartnett, who is an expert on cybersecurity, is on our advisory council. And as we've set up our advisory council, we have leading industry, technology, government policymakers. Mignon Clyburn, who's a great friend and partner, who was a FCC commissioner and now worked with us on different campaigns. So we're able to bring in both policymakers, university and academic, and then industry leaders that are diverse in both the regional differences of our country, our political differences, but how do we apply the policies that were so successful in the 1996 Act, in the early days of the internet policy formations, and how do we apply that to AI? And so we're very excited. Colin Crowell, who leads the Blue Owl Group, who worked for Senator Markey when he was in the House, was a young staffer, very well respected, that helped form the Cable Act, the Wireless Competitive Act, the 96 Act, the early internet. He and I feel like on a bipartisan basis, we got to see early policy formation and kind of the enduring core principles that have made those policies successful. Now, how do we apply that and those experiences to AI? And we think that we can put together both the relationships congressionally in the next administration and with this organization and structure that is very broad-based together to give us, whether it is on how do you make AI or protect competition, how do we promote safety and trust, how do we address cybersecurity issues, critical infrastructure, how do we maximize and optimize our networks, whether it is a fiber network or a wireless network and spectrum, how do we maintain the privacy of the users? So it is a broad, comprehensive approach and framework that we hope can help the next administration and Congress put together something that allows the U.S. to maintain its leadership role on this transformational technology that will be pervasive and profound in all of our lives. And we want to make sure that we help get it right. And so the AI Center is working now to have, by the end of the year, a policy framework ready to be something that we hope that can help policymakers make the right decisions as it relates to AI.
That's a huge undertaking, but I will also say that I'm comforted to know that you're working on this, because the government, which we'll get there in a minute, needs to know that the industry folks and the academics and the policymakers are all coming together to have these discussions, preparing for hard decisions that are going to need to be made, preparing for the policy that's being going to need to be set forth at the federal level and then the individual state levels. It's an interesting time, and if I may add, not to make it too political, but no doubt it's even more volatile because we're in an election year and it's a big election. Um, how how do you navigate this unknown certainty? I mean, it's about making the framework anyhow, but how do you how do you navigate that with the different outcomes that could possibly be as the result of November?
Well, that's as you as you heard me talk through the structure of what we're doing, I can tell you whether you're a Republican or a Democrat in Mississippi, if Ole Miss and Jackson State and Mississippi State, or if it's University of Cincinnati, if you're a member of Congress from Ohio or University of Arizona, having a national structure and coalition, both of the leading companies of each region, the leading technology companies, the leading university centers coming before Congress, it really, what we hope is that we're building the consensus that on the policy and the expert input and knowledge that will help our policymakers. We've learned over the last 30 years that most of technology and most of telecommunications and now broadband policy has been bipartisan. So where the country may be deeply divided and deeply partisan and having a hard time solving a whole range of issues, we're very fortunate that in our space that we've been able to preserve and maintain a bipartisan commitment to how we look at it. Not that it's easy, it's not easy, and not that it's not complex, because it is. But at least we have this long tradition of bipartisanship in this part of our economy and technology and how it affects both our economic standing and international leadership and our national security. And so we really think that what INCOMPAS and our members are doing is important work that hopefully will help the country reach a consensus on how to go forward, because having trust and security and competition is important. And we've seen that over the last 30 years. We know the success that it's brought, and we're the world leaders in technology and innovation and creativity and investment. We're the leaders in AI, but it can be lost, especially as we have a new rivalry with China. There are three models out there. There's the state-sponsored model of China and Russia and North Korea. Europe is taking more of a regulatory approach that you have to get permission first. And how do we maintain kind of the unique role that America plays in the world, that we are the creators, we're the innovators, we lead the world, we take the risk, but we do it in a way that with the rule of law that gives us enough predictability and stability and certainty that our markets emerge with trust. And so that's what we're trying to do.
That makes perfect sense. And I guess in part, part of what I'm observing as the rest of us are, and you'll understand in a second, are shifting policies and kind of backtracking a little bit. Let's take, for example, the Supreme Court decision, right? The reversal of the Chevron matter. And I know, I don't want to steal your thunder, but let our listeners know how they can learn more, because I think you guys are going to have a program on that. But maybe tease a little bit about what that might be addressing, because this could have repercussions in a variety of different directions, both direct and indirect.
Yeah, it's so since really the early 80s, the Chevron deference was really a deference that the courts gave to the expert regulatory agencies if Congress delegated rulemaking and regulatory authority, and whether it's telecommunications or the environment or energy or transportation, all of those different regulatory agencies in the different sectors of our economy and how we govern. And the ruling by the Supreme Court really takes that deference away from the regulatory agencies and says, if Congress doesn't specifically direct the regulatory agency in a very granular, specific way, then those types of delegated authorities, any of those rules that have come from that, could be at risk in the future. And that we'll probably see a whole range of challenges and litigation across the board, including in FCC decisions or telecommunication broadband decisions. And we don't yet know how disruptive that's going to be to the predictability, the certainty that we've had since 1996. And so it shifts power back to Congress. It shifts power to the courts, and it reduces the power, the influence of the different regulatory agencies. And how that plays out is still, like our politics, unpredictable, and it's still volatile. And so I would, and this is where I think an organization like INCOMPAS can help companies navigate what could be a very disruptive period of time as far as the rules of the road, and have someone who can, as Congress becomes more dominant and or by necessity, how do we help you navigate that? If Congress is also delegating to the states big programs like BEAD, how do we help you as the devolution from the federal to the state level occurs? And for our companies, where the networks meet the road or cross the railroad, are attached to the poles, the practical aspects, or for our data centers, how do we have energy policy that is sustainable, gives us a reliable supply and a growing supply to meet the growing demand? So energy, our networks and energy policy and our digital infrastructure and electricity energy policy is really going to become merged in a way that has not been up till now. And so one of the things we're doing with the AI Center and focusing on is, how do we get energy policy right? How do we have the renewables and nuclear power? And how do we also change the permitting so that we can build the grid to meet the demand that we need for the future? So the committee I served on is the Energy and Commerce Committee. Energy and broadband have a lot of policy parallels. I think we'll see emerging new competition and disruption in our energy markets, and new technologies and new innovation in our energy electricity grid that we haven't seen in our lifetime because of AI. So that's an exciting component of what we're trying to focus on and what we're going to address with the AI Center.
I'm so glad you brought that up, your experience, with the Energy and Commerce Committee and telecommunications, because this is for the first time since this industry has evolved to this point, where that intersection is so important to get it right together, because they each depend on each other to enable the future of digital infrastructure and AI. This is definitely one of the reasons why I felt that this program was really important for the listeners and for the greater industry. There's so much volatility going on. There's so much uncertainty. There's reversals of these decisions and all these matters that are taking shape that could truly upend what we know today. It could disrupt businesses. It could disrupt the pace of innovation, the pace of adoption, the pace of rollout. And, for businesses and entrepreneurs who are looking to start and, fill in gaps of opportunities and things that might be taking shape in the space as well, being educated and understanding what, if, and how might come is key to ongoing success. And I think Encompass, and you in particular, Chip, as the leader of Encompass with your a terrific team, by the way. It's an important time that companies kind of double down a little bit and take a look at how they protect their assets and protect the future of this industry and how we could do that together.
No, and I really believe that that's Encompass's strength. We can give you the information, kind of the intelligence gathering, the knowledge that you need to successfully navigate for your business, the tremendous opportunity, tremendous risk, and then how do we form the policies of the future in this context so that our companies continue to be successful and to meet the moment of the demand for advanced networks of all technologies, the digital infrastructure, the data centers, the power, the electricity, as this new wave of AI washes over our industry. And so how do we, again, the good thing is the core values that started in 1981 are still the core values of 2024. And we know that we can apply those enduring universal values to each decade of new technology. And that our process of how you build consensus, that process still is the same type of how do you build consensus and trust with trusted institutions, trusted individuals, to then work within the process of our democracy and governance. And because we've been successful in the past, we believe we can be successful in the future.
For sure. So just a reminder for all of our attendees here, we do have questions and answer session coming up very shortly. I have a couple more questions for Chip before we pivot to you. I see we do have a couple of questions already in our queue, but if you have them, certainly feel free to go ahead and drop them in, just type them into the Q&A box. And we'll be getting over there in just a second, because one of the things that, again, membership support of Encompass is important because of all this really important work that you're hearing that Encompass does for all of the companies in the industry. But membership is, and membership is on a scale, a scale based off of your revenue, and they can answer all those questions about that directly. We're not going to be going into that today. But I do want to make sure that everyone understands that you can engage with Encompass without being a member. And they have an annual event. They have other events. I'll have Chip talk about that as well. But companies, large, small, and all around, really should check out the INCOMPAS Show, which takes place in the fall. Chip, you want to share a little bit highlights about the INCOMPAS Show?
We're in Denver this year, and in October, I need to make sure I believe it's the 22nd through the 24th. I know if Julia Stroud, my chief of staff, or Neil, in October 20th through the 22nd. So thank you.
20th through 22nd in Denver. Yes.
Denver. And last time we were in Denver 2 years ago, we had one of our best shows ever. Great turnout. It's really a hub of our industry and technology in the West. Last year we were in Tampa, and so East Coast and sunny Florida. Both were great shows. We've seen year-over-year growth, which really reflects what's happening in the industry. As our industry grows, the competitive industry, competitive networks, private equity, investment, and what's happening with BEAD and the federal funding, we have had tremendous shows. And from those, at the show, we're really promoting the business-to-business relationships, the buy and the sell from all of the ecosystem that we've talked about in our membership. In the spring, we have a policy summit, usually either in February or March, in the first quarter of the year, so that we can influence in the first 100 days what is happening in a new session or Congress or a new administration. And we have leading policymakers from Congress, from the regulatory agencies, from the executive branch, from the White House, and leading industry thought leaders. And we bring and convene people together. So one of the great, I think, values that INCOMPAS can give any company from small to large is this ability to convene the community. And this is something that you're great at. You bring the community together, you share information and knowledge, but it brings together the partnerships, both business and in advocacy, that we think is critically important during this time. And so we'll have the October 22nd Denver show. We invite everyone to come join us, learn more about INCOMPAS. And then as we go into post-election, as we prepare for the new Congress, the new administration, how do we maintain this nonpartisan, bipartisan consensus on the big issues that affect our industry? And how do we navigate through a changing legal regulatory environment? And so that the businesses that we represent, the companies we represent, continue to be profitable, successful, and that they can make long-range investments that in a very capital-intensive industry.
Yeah, you guys are doing such an important work. And I have to add that, I've been going to the INCOMPAS show when it was CompTel, right? So the Competitive Telecom Association, before it was INCOMPAS. It is one of my favorite shows because you've designed it so that the exhibit floor is also the meeting place, is also the central hub. It's where everything happens. And so you don't have to go to a separate room for exhibits. You don't have to go to a separate room for your meeting space and all of that. It's a centralized and optimized so that you can be seen, learn, and get exposed to almost every company that is supporting the event. It offers companies incredible visibility to be seen and heard as well. So it's uniquely set up, purpose driven for the buy sell approach in our industry, with augmented with the key topics that are relevant to empower the buy sell community, as well as the regulatory insights that are the underpinning realities of how business needs and should be done, so to drive that. So well done on the entire
Well, thank
team's effort on reinvigorating the INCOMPAS show over the past few years.
Well, thank you. And I want to recognize, as we rebranded from CompTel to INCOMPAS to reflect more of the current age of the internet and competitive networks, you were a good guide for us. You gave us, very helpful feedback. Your public relations, your network of the companies that you have brought together, and knowing us from the 96 to now, I just want to thank you. You've been a great partner with us. You've guided us and given us good wisdom, and have been faithful to bring your community into to recommend that they come in to our events and participate with us. So we're very grateful for you.
Well, you're very welcome. Thank you. So we're going to switch over to Q&A now. We do have some questions in here, and I'm going to take them in order as they have been received. So the first question is, should the government have regulations that require at least public housing to have open access fiber interduct conduits to promote competition in a free market?
Oh, that is a great question. So as you look at public housing or public rights of way, our infrastructure, when we're building our highways or our streets, Google Fiber is one of our member companies, and they back 10 plus years ago began this process of saying to local communities, if you make it easier for us to build, to permit, to attach, we will come to your city and deploy new fiber networks. I think whether it's public housing or on the rights of way, giving the conduit so that multiple providers and competitors can come and compete for each individual consumer is a smart thing to do. And so, and we're beginning to see the market, whether it's AT&T that is building an open access network outside of its footprint, others that are beginning to provide open access networks on a wholesale basis. Those types of markets, they're not for every place or for everyone, but we're beginning to see those market-based solutions for the world in which we now operate, where high capacity networks and open access and shared infrastructure, both wired and wireless, are beginning to take root in market based ways.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense to me, and I do think that question was super smart and interesting, right? One of the ways to control how you bridge and meet the needs of the underserved community is to provide the infrastructure to enable and empower them as you are preparing to support. So,
But let me also say, I've learned that one size doesn't always fit every situation. And there are cases where, maybe the investment model to go into low income neighborhoods, it may be a different type of policy or approach. And so I want us to be open to what is the best way to achieve the objective of serving unserved and underserved and low income communities. The ACP was, the Affordable Connectivity Program that came out of COVID during the PI Commission. If one of our builders knows that they can serve someone and they can afford the service and that they can subscribe to it, it helps a build case for all parts of the community, not just the high income or the mid income, but all income builds. And so that was, as an ACP, if our listeners are familiar with that, that was paired with the BEAD deployment funding with a subsidy to low income individuals so that they could actually afford and buy broadband service.
right. All right. Well, our next question. I'm going to rephrase this. I'm going to answer it just as it's been, but I think I'm going to rephrase it a little bit. The question that came in is, what are your thoughts about BEAD bias toward incumbents? And a link was provided to some 5 reasons that BEAD alone won't deliver internet for all. And I think I want to rephrase it for us as, how is INCOMPAS helping to navigate the gaps that programs like the BEAD don't always consider or anticipate? Because we know that nothing is 100% perfect and complete. And we learn in this process, right? You have all these planning phases and you can anticipate as much until you don't anticipate at all and you can't ever. So my rephrase of, how is INCOMPAS helping to navigate gaps like the BEAD program?
And it's a valid question. As we see in many states, the incumbents or the large cable or telco advantage in many places is persisting, and how different COVID-related awards have been made. But at the same time, we see around the country that if a competitive network, whether that is a C Spire in our region, Mississippi, Alabama, or if other companies that have established like Idea Tech in Kansas or Mammoth in Montana, new emerging companies have been very successful because they built relationships at the local level and at the state level and with their broadband office. And so what I would encourage everyone to do is engage with your broadband office, engage with your local leaders and your state leaders So, because like all things in life, relationships matter. And if you build a relationship, what I found from the competitive industry is that policymakers at every level, if you can go and tell your story about where you're building in their state or in their district, they will be very responsive and they'll be very favorable, and they will try to do everything they can to help you, even if it means that the big guys have competition. And so it's getting in front of the right people. And that's where, again, Encompass, we think that we do a good job of connecting our members at every level to the policymakers and the decision makers so that we can tell our story and our members can tell their story. And our experience is theonce you do that, you can, a lot of times you can beat the more established, the incumbent, because there's not a, because the entrenched incumbents have not necessarily done a good job of serving and building out broadband to the country and the service and the price, it gives us an opening as the competitors to come in and tell a new story in a new way, in a better way, in a lower price and a better service. And those are the hallmarks of our competitive companies.
For sure. You guys do great work for the industry, for your member companies, and for the greater good of the entire industry. Just a reminder that I'm going to see you live and in person, if not sooner, definitely in Denver at the INCOMPAS Show, October 20th through 22nd on this year. It's a not to be missed. They do great work in helping to set everyone who attends that event up for success. Transparency in who's attending, and encouraging outreach and helping members navigate, other companies that are there to meet with, aligning on areas of interest and expertise, all of the above. And Chip and the rest of his team will be there and are accessible for you guys to meet before, during, after. This, as always, is a pleasure to talk to you, Chip. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And if there's anything that we haven't covered that you would like to share with the attendees, you get the closing remarks from here.
Well, we have an open door. We're very accessible, very responsive. We want to share all the information that you might need as you navigate this era, this time. But we also want to bring you into our community, our coalition, and be a part of what Encompass is doing, both on the business to business side, the partnership side, and the advocacy side. So please contact us if you're interested in Encompass. Come to our show, meet us, and we would love to build a relationship with you. Thanks for this time as we talk about what is important to all the companies who are building out the digital infrastructure and the applications that are riding on top of our networks. This is an exciting time, and I look forward to our continued work together. And thank you for the time today.
Got it. Thank you. And my last tip for everybody, hold on, guys, because it's going to be a bumpy ride.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your time
Thank you.
today, everybody.